All right, so compound discs. You have heard me talk about them. This is the Tunnel Shot. The Tunnel Shot has been in my bag since I got it. I tried it out at my first sanctioned event back in the year. I got to throw a prototype, and then I tried it out for a little bit, and it has been in the bag since I got them. Really enjoyed it. Really straight flyer, which feels really good. I like that a lot. But I've been trying it in place of my Polecat, and I think it's just a hair more overstable than the Polecat at a lower speed, which is tough because I need that disc to be really straight to even understable so that I can work it and maneuver it. So we have the entire compound discs lineup here. He has 4 molds. 3 of them are currently PDJ approved, and this one, spoiler alert, is coming in the fall, but we haven't know. A little sneak peek action. Thank you, Hayden.
So catch me if I fall.
But here are the 3 major things that we want to address while we discuss the molds that are in the lineup. We want to talk about, is this actually good for the sport? Are these actually durable? And C, do they actually fly well enough that you should consider putting one in your bag? I'm all about supporting friends, and I'm so pumped that Hayden out of Georgia is making these discs, and so really excited to test them out and showcase them all for you. So let's go ahead and see what they fly like. All right, so we are currently trying to jump between storm cells, having a good old time. Hopefully we don't get struck by the lightning, but we're bringing more than just lightning. So I'm talking about the thunder in this arm right here. All right, we're gonna go ahead and throw all 4 of these just so you can see, hopefully like get a glimpse of what the flights are. I'll put the flight numbers on screen for you so that you have them. But yeah, this is the Tunnel Shot, which is their neutral putter. I'm gonna try to throw it flat and let's see what we can do. A little bit of drift. You can see a little bit of drift. I threw it kind of nose up, but just the tiniest bit of drift, which is fantastic. The Tunnel Shot was actually their 2nd mold. The Barb was the first one that they came out with, which is this guy right here. And the Barb was designed, Hayden was originally a Team AGL guy, and he threw his Baobab all over the place and wanted to come up with a more durable Baobab alternative. And then this one didn't end up being as overstable as the Baobab that he was throwing, and so, but still very usable. So this is the Barb. We're gonna try to throw it flat as well and see what we can get. And you can see definitely some right to left movement coming out of that guy. Next up is the Path, which for those of you who aren't connecting the dots, it's like compound disc golf here, rural Georgia. So with the Tunnel Shot, the Barb, this is the Path. This is their neutral to overstable putter. So kind of should be the perfect complement to what the Tunnel Shot is doing. I put that one on a little more hyzer, so that's my bad, user error. But yeah, definitely put it on some hyzer, but it leaned into that a little bit. I wouldn't say that it was like a dumpy hyzer, really reliable. I'd be curious if I like intentionally tried to throw it on hyzer instead of like my sneaky hyzer, which is my flat. So last but not least is the Hazard, which this mold is not currently PDGA approved, but should be approved by the end of the year. This is supposed to be like a Justice replacement. So I'm gonna actually try to throw her on a little bit of anhyzer. And you can just see it fought out of it immediately. Big skip to the left. Some interesting ones. Let's jump into the first hole and talk about what these discs can mean to sort of the future of disc golf. Our first hole coming in at 177 feet. You can actually, like through this gap on the right, you can see the basket, but traditionally it can be a turnover. But I feel like in the summer when things start to bloom, you end up with that line gets really crowded and it gets really particular, whereas you can kind of go the forehand out and around, or you can go forehand inside. We're gonna hit it with the 2 overstable ones. Now, one of the big things about Robbie C is that when things are wet, my forehand falls apart dramatically. So I'll be interested to see on the grip of these. Now, I've tried other 3D printed discs before, and one thing that I think Hayden does really well is these feel really good for like a hand feel. They're very flexible, don't have a lot of rigidity. And one thing Hayden's trying to do on basically all of his molds is make it so that it's much more of a rounded feel, which feels a lot more like a traditional sort of throwing disc, a lot more like a traditional disc. And other 3D printing companies, their molds are a lot more sharp on the sides, and so that can be really uncomfortable to feel in your hands. Now, granted, Hayden hasn't come out with a driver yet, so I'll be curious how that feels, but the round approach actually makes it feel really well, or really good. Sorry for the hiccups, y'all. That's a tough look. So do I think this is actually a good thing for the sport? Honestly, yeah, because I think that people who are smart enough to design some of the different discs that are out there, they can, for instance, like this barb, you have someone who was throwing the Baobab that was having a hard time keeping up with a disc they love from a really small company and having a hard time getting a lot of them, getting a stock amount of them. Perfect, it's parked. Okay, we can push this a little more. But because he couldn't find a whole lot of them, even when we went to introduce people to it, they might have a hard time finding a Baobab. And so because of that, he has created more disc opportunities. I mean, those are both parked. The reliability and the overstability of those is incredible. But he's created an opportunity for more people to find a disc that they're going to love. And when you find a disc that you love, I feel like it's inevitable that you're going to fall more in love with the sport when there's a disc that you really just connect with. And I don't necessarily think that more disc options out there are bad or are choking away sort of like competition from one another. Now, I'll play devil's advocate to myself here and say, well, what about supporting the smaller companies? What about letting them have more of a market share, whatever that may be? For instance, if he's trying to create an alternative to the Baobab by him making a new disc, is that taking away sales from the Baobab and from AGL, making it harder for them as a small company to stay sustained? And I think that's a valid argument, but at the same time, the smaller companies, everyone only has so much capacity in which they can put out more discs. Hayden, for instance, is limited by his 3D printers. So for him to go out and produce these discs, he can be running them overnight, he can be printing multiple discs overnight, but it still takes an opportunity for them to put a disc in someone's hands, whether they're buying from one small company or another. I do think that there is sort of this cannibalization that's going to happen, and I think certain companies are going to stay and certain companies are going to fold. But the better you can be at minimizing your costs to produce the discs, I think that is going to help the sport in the long run. And also, I think 3D printing discs introduces a whole new side of disc golf that has been sort of unattainable by anyone else. All right, next hole is 291 feet. It's just out there in the middle of the open field. I'm gonna go with the path and the tunnel shot on this one. I think that both the barb and the hazard are too overstable for me to comfortably sort of pump it out there. It's a mush. It just rained, and so unfortunately the tee pads are soaking wet, so I'm gonna throw from the mud on the side of the pad. But let me tell you about the idea or the avenue that I think people are getting access to, and that is, quite simply, designing discs. This has been something that, we got a little turn on her. Yeah, I like that. I started it way early, but I like that. Designing discs has been something you can almost name, if you're like real in the scene, you can name the people that have designed so many discs. Dave Dunapace is designing a bunch of discs. Tomas over at Trilogy is designing a bunch of discs, and honestly, he's not just designing those, he's designed several Discmania molds. The Tilt, for instance, designed by Tomas. And that is why Robbie C, I have insider knowledge. I played Ultimate and baseball for so long, my knees are, I have the knees of like an 85-year-old man. If you want to get in my head in a round of disc golf, either A, take me to New London, or B, mess with my footing. And the fact that I could feel myself slipping there, I know I'd slip more on the tee pads. you can just like see my physical like restraint and hesitation and like trying to trust to throw a shot. If I slip once during a round, just be prepared. This is going to be bad throwing for the rest of the video because I won't be able to get it out of my head. Poor mental resolve there. Well, let me just tell you, it is not easy to design discs. I know for a fact. People are like, oh, I think that most often the successful discs that we're seeing from like first time designers are coming from like replicating what other people have done. But one thing that like I said, I've had a lot of practice with that tunnel shot. The path, first time throwing it. One thing that I'm noticing on a lot of folks who are either 3D printing discs or making discs for the first time, it feels so much easier to design an overstable disc because we're seeing so many overstable discs in the market. And personally, maybe it's because I'm part of Noodle Arms United or I just really care about beginners, but I think understable discs are so useful in terms of like more people can have access to throw them early on. And sure, you can always beat an overstable disc in, so like the longevity of it staying in your bag is higher, but it is interesting from the design standpoint how many people, like just looking at this lineup, you have moderately overstable, super overstable, and then neutral to overstable, and then a neutral to understable disc. So 4 discs and 3 of them have more stability than understability. Like I said, I really do love that it gives opportunity for more people to get into designing discs, because if you have the 3D printer, you have an understanding of sort of how to work that system, you can print prototypes pretty comfortably. In fact, I would be lying if I said we definitely don't have someone in the birdie fam who's currently trying to design an alternative to the pig in this plastic that's going to fly over stable and just be really nice. Yeah, that's definitely not happening. But I love that opportunity exists. I also think that as the sport continues to grow, there needs to be room and opportunity for people who are not on the pro scene to actually be able to make a living inside of this. And being able to make and manufacture your own discs is a pretty cool process. But let's talk about like the financials and what does that sort of mean, or what barriers to entry are not being approached by these guys. This hole is 150 feet. You can see it right through that gap right there. We're gonna go the turnover with the pat and the forehand with the barb. But you may think, what if someone with 3D printing, this just opens it up that any Joe can make a disc, get out there and throw it on the course and beat me with it. So like, now we're not supporting anyone because you can just 3D print your own discs. But you have to understand that these molds still, in order to be used in PDGA sanctioned competition, they have to be PDGA approved, which I think the fee last year to get approved was $300, and they've upped it this year to where it's $500 unless it's your first year, and then you get a discount on getting discs approved. So there is still financial equity being put into these molds to provide them. So it's not like even Hayden's just sitting at his house with 3D printers and he's like, oh, that'd be a cool disc, and he makes it, and he's like, now I'm gonna go throw it in a tournament. No, in order for him to approve them, he has to have money, which is probably part of the reason why, he didn't tell me this, but like part of the reason why the hazard is not going to be approved until later this year, because that's hundreds of dollars that he has to put in to getting it approved. Now, let's say that it costs, I don't know, $8 for him to produce the disc if he counts the time, the manufacturing, the parts, the filament, whatever it may be. That's a little wide. It's going to be parked, but it's not a very good ace run. Here we go. Nah, too nosy. Too nosy, and I didn't turn it over at all. But at $500 to get a disc approved, it's cost $8, so he's making 12 bucks off of a disc, we'll say. Just flat out, we're not going to account for taxes, anything like that, which would obviously affect us. So we'll go even lower. We'll say he's making $7 off of a disc. He would only need to sell 70 discs of any mold, and suddenly that mold or that cost is paid for itself. So from a business standpoint, I think it actually makes a lot of sense and can start as a really cool side hustle. And let's say you spend your first 500 and get everything approved, then you can start to use those processes to buy more 3D printers, which allows you to up your production standpoint, and therefore like the chain feeds itself. And suddenly, because Hayden has decided to try to figure out how to design discs, he has created a side income that's really good and could eventually allow him to go full-time in disc golf and just manufacturing the discs. And that, to me, is actually crazy cool. Now, an interesting, devil's advocate alternative argument to this is, well, it seems unfair that Dave Dunapace, in order to make a mold with Innova, had to buy a $100,000+ injection molding machine, and then he has to pay $30,000 to buy the mold to actually make it. So his costs are a lot higher than and he also obviously has to get the disc approved. So should 3D printing companies actually have to pay more to get the molds approved? I think that is an interesting argument that could be made in terms of, for the playing field to feel level, does that actually make the playing field level? I don't know. Another particular issue is, let's say like that the room that they're printing these discs in the summer, they have the printer set up in the garage. Okay, cool. Well, in the summer, that's going to be a little warmer, which is going to cause them to cool a little bit differently. Whereas lots of the manufacturers may have a more fine-lined process to create a more common disc. Also, when you are sending in your molds to get approved, you're supposed to send them in with the most rigid plastic that you have, because one of the tests is they're going to take them and like bend them like so. Whereas this is going to feel that pretty comfortably. That's going to be very easy. It's going to get approved every time. But what happens if later on down the road he finds another filament or something like that? For instance, even on this Hazard, there is actually like a level of sheen on top. So there's like another layer that is not on the others. Does that make it more rigid? Does that not make it more rigid? Was that added on, or is this a trial? There's just so many variants to getting a disc approved anyways, that I feel like with the 3D printing process, there's going to be a lot more variability and a lot more flexibility. And I think that's overall good for the sport, but it does put those using injection molding machines at a disadvantage. So is that fair to the overall production in disc golf world? I don't know. I think at the end of the day, there's just a lot of question marks when it comes to the later on impact of what we're going to see with 3D printing becoming more and more popular. And like I said, I felt several 3D printed discs. I felt from the chef that we have cooking inside the Birdie fam. I felt these from Hayden. I felt them from other companies, and the feel can be so drastically different. So it's not even like, oh, it's just that easy. You grab a 3D printer and suddenly, congratulations, you're sitting on a gold mine of like different opportunities and molds. Everyone's just going to buy all your stuff. I don't think that's necessarily true, because some 3D printed discs feel really good and some 3D printed discs just don't feel good. So also, you could have a great feeling 3D printed disc, but if the mold doesn't fly well or it's brittle, then congratulations, that's not going to go well either, because I don't want to pay $22 for a disc that's going to explode the first time it hits a tree. So that brings us to our second question: how durable are they? It's convenient that I asked this question on this hole, because that way if I miss the line, I can just tell that I was testing it for science. That was the tunnel shot, and this is the Hazard going for the wide hyzer. Not that wide. But once again, just testing durability. Here, why don't we go 2 more off of this? Just feel it out. Let's go the path. And then we'll go the barb. Let's see those results. Okay, so both of these hit a tree. This one hit it a little more softly. I can't even see like where it hit on the tree because it's still holding tight. This one hit a tree a lot more, with a lot more vigor, and I can't tell where it got hit either. But maybe this wasn't scientific enough. Maybe just maybe we gotta really test it. Are you guys ready for some science? This is me. This is the tunnel shot. That's a genuine 100% real tree. And here is me soft throwing it straight into a tree. It's dirty because it rained and there's dirt on the ground. Maybe that's where it hit. Nope. Still no issue. Let's go one more time. Still nothing. It's holding up amazingly. Let's see if we go with the barb, and let's just, for the sake of science, I'm sorry, Hayden, to do this to you, but for the sake of science, why don't we full send this? I rolled away a significant amount. Unsurprisingly, she bounces off. No major marks that I'm seeing whatsoever. What's also interesting about this plastic is that it floats, which is fascinating. And for those using the suction cup like max distance retrievers, apparently it doesn't pick these up very well because it's like the plastic allows it to float. So all of his molds so far do float, which is fascinating. One more time, you know, because I know you guys are loving the science. Yeah, holding up like a champ. Durability test, check. All right, we've talked quite a bit this video, so we're gonna close it out with 4 haste runs and give final thoughts on the molds. The tunnel shot, I'm already familiar with. I love that disc. I think it's a great flyer. The thing with the tunnel shot is, I would say the tunnel shot flies very similarly to like a very overstable or premium plastic pure. It's gonna hold straight. It might have a little bit of finish. Maybe even a proxy is probably the better comparison because a pure is still gonna have some turn to it and everything. I wanted this to fly in comparison to my pole cap, but there's just a hint more stability in this, which causes me to have some issues. So I think that it's not gonna hold the bit like the slot long term, but some of these other molds might fight in. Off the tree and it's parked. Not enough height. Next up is the path, which at that 3302, I am very intrigued by this. I was worried because the tunnel shot is a little shallow, and I was thinking about this as a alternative to the Wizard in my bag, just as a throwing putter. I'm enjoying the birdie blends, but as I've made some changes, when I really get a hold of the birdie blend, it holds pretty straight, and it is base plastic, so it's gonna lose that durability as a thrower if I throw it hard into 1 or 2 trees. And as we've already seen, these are durable. So I think this is a great alternative option. I'm just giving you guys so many durability tests. It's still held up, so you guys are gonna have to go check one out yourself. Sorry, I know the plastic budget was probably going towards one new like Simon or Eagle drop, but fortunately it looks like you're gonna have to check this out. Okay, I am early releasing a lot of my backhands today. I'm just not committing. Next up we have the barb. I do think the barb is an intriguing option. It's overstable, it's definitely overstable, but I would not describe it as like Zono S beef. It's definitely not as overstable as the Baobab. We're gonna go flexor up the gap here and see what we can do. Yeah, it just pans out pretty nicely. And then last but not least, later to be released, the Hazard. This disc, for me, I have a Justice in my bag in this slot, and I always struggle with the Justice because I really don't lean on it too often. And so for discs to jump into the Justice slot, because it's not a disc that I use that often, I struggle to replace it because I want that comfort when I come home to it. But I put a Zono S in my bag in that slot for a little bit. This is the most intriguing to me, but it's not PDGA approved yet, so that'll give me some time to sort of mess around with it to see if it stays in the bag. We can give this a little more height, and it's gonna fight out even more so than that barb just did. That much anhyzer, and it's still fought through trees and faded out. Phenomenal options. Let me know for you, if you're watching this video, which of the compound molds are you most interested in and what seems the most fascinating to you? And I would love to hear your thoughts. Do you think that the 3D printing world is good or bad for the sport overall? Very excited to hear the discussion going on in these comments. But in the meantime, I want to say thank you so much for tuning in. I can see another very dark set of storm clouds rolling in, so I'm going to get to the car and not get struck by lightning. Hopefully, if you don't see a video next week, it's because things happened. But in the meantime, hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Please make it fantastic for someone else too. But for now, we're going to leave you with the birdie.